Back to my channel Firewall again. Let's try to identify appropriate interface type and configuration for a specified network deployment. We're going to learn types of interfaces. Palo Alto Network Firewall supports several different interface types like tap mode, virtual wire mode, layer 2, layer 3 and aggregate. A single firewall can freely intermix interface types to meet any integration need. The decision about which interface configuration to choose depends on functional need and existing network integration requirements. As shown in the figure, we'll be going to touch each and every interface available in Palo Alto Firewall one by one. So let's begin. Let's begin with tap. A network tap is a device that provides a way to access data flowing across a computer network. Tap model deployment allows you to passively monitor traffic flows across a network using a switch span or a mirror port. A switch span or a mirror port permits the copying of traffic from other ports on the switch to the tap interface of the firewall, providing a one-way flow of copied network traffic into the firewall. This configuration allows the firewall to perform detection of traffic and threats, but prevents any enforcement action from taking place because the traffic does flow through firewall back to the environment. By deploying the firewall in a tap mode, you can get visibility into which applications are running on the network without having to make any changes to your network design. When the firewall is in tap mode, it also can identify threats on your network. Remember, however, that the traffic is not running through the firewall when the firewall is in a tap mode. So no action can be taken on the traffic, including blocking traffic with threats or applying QoS traffic control. Let's understand virtual wire. In a virtual wire deployment, you install a firewall transparently on a network segment by binding two firewall ports interfaces together. The virtual wire logically connects the two interfaces, hence the virtual wire is internal to the firewall. Use a virtual wire deployment only when you want to seamlessly integrate a firewall into a topology and the two connected interfaces on the firewall need not do any switching or routing. For these two interfaces, the firewall is considered a bump in the wire. A virtual wire deployment simplifies firewall installation and configuration because you can insert the firewall into an existing topology without assigning MAC or IP address to the interface, redesigning the network or reconfiguring surrounding network devices. The virtual wire supports blocking or allowing traffic based on virtual wire VLAN tags. It also supports security policy rules, app ID, content ID, user ID, decryption, LLDP, active, passive and active HA, QoS, zone protection with some exceptions, non-IP protocol protections, DDoS protections, packet buffer protections, tunnel content inspection and NAT. Each virtual wire interface is directly connected to a layer 2 or a layer 3 networking device or host. The virtual wire interface have no layer 2 or layer 3 addresses. When one of the virtual wire interface receives a frame or a packet, it ignores any layer 2 or layer 3 addresses for switching or routing purposes, but applies your security or a NAT policy rules before passing an allowed frame or a packet over the virtual wire to the second interface and onto the network device connected to it. Again, I am telling you, wouldn't use a virtual wire deployment for interfaces that need to support switching, VPN tunnels or routing because they require a layer 2 or layer 3 addresses. A virtual wire interface doesn't use an interface management profile which control services such as HTTP and ping, and therefore requiring the interface to have an address. All firewalls shipped from the factory have two Ethernet ports, port 1 and 2, pre-configured as a virtual wire interface, and this interface allows all untagged traffic. Now let's understand layer 2 interface. In layer 2 deployment, the firewall provides switching between two or more networks. Devices are connected to a layer 2 segment. The firewall forwards the frames to the proper port, which is associated with the MAC address identified in the frame. Configure layer 2 interface when switching is required. Okay, now let's see layer 3. In a layer 3 deployment, the firewall routes traffic between multiple ports using TCP/IP addressing. Before you can configure layer 3 interface, you must configure the virtual router that you want the firewall to use to route the traffic for each layer 3 interface. Layer 3 deployments require more network planning and configuration preparation that do most other firewall interface, but still are the most widely used in a firewall deployments. Palo Alto Networks supports both IPv4 and IPv6 simultaneously through a dual stack implementation when the IPv6 is required. Each layer 3 interface must be configured with an IPv4 and IPv6 address, zone name assignment, and the attached virtual router that services the traffic on the interface. Options available to meet other connectivity requirement includes NetFlow integration, MSS adjustment, maximum segment unit adjustment, MTU adjustment, binding of firewall services, ping response, web management, interface availability, etc. Neighbor discovery for IPv6, manual MAC address assignment, LLDP enhancement, dynamic DNS supports, link negotiation settings. Now let's see decrypt mirror. Decrypt mirror is a special configuration supporting the routing of decrypted traffic copies through an external interface to a data loss prevention service. Data loss prevention is a product category for products that scan internet bound traffic for keywords and patterns that identify sensitive information. Now let's look into the aggregate interfaces. An aggregated interfaces or aggregate Ethernet AE interface group uses IEEE 802.1ax link aggregation to combine multiple Ethernet interface into a single virtual interface that connects the firewall to another network device or another firewall. An AE interface group increases the bandwidth between the peers by load balancing traffic across the combined interfaces. It also provides redundancy when one interface fails, the remaining interface continues to support traffic. Before you configure an AE aggregated Ethernet interface group, you must configure its interfaces. Hardware media can differ amongst the interfaces assigned to any particular aggregated group. For example, you can mix fiber optic and copper, but bandwidth 1 GB per second or 10 GB, 40 GB or 100 GB, and interface type H3 virtual wire layer 2, layer 3 must be the same. You can add up to 8 AE aggregated Ethernet interface groups per firewall, and each group can have up to 8 interface. Aggregate interface creation begins with the definition of an aggregate interface group, after which individual interfaces are added into the group. Now let's see some other interfaces available in a firewalls. Number 1, virtual interfaces. Palo Alto Network Firewall also provides several interfaces types for additional functionalities. One of them is VLAN interface, which comes under the virtual interface. VLANs are logical interface that specifically serves as interconnect between on-board virtual switches, VLANs, and virtual routers, which allows to move from layer 2 to layer 3 within the firewall. Then there is a loopback interfaces. Loopback interface are layer 3 interface that exist only virtually and connect to the virtual router in the firewall. Loopback interfaces are used for multiple network engineering and implementation purpose. They can be destination configuration for DNS sinkholes, global protect service interface, portal and gateways, routing identification, and many more. Specific information about the loopback interface can be found in a reference for layer 3 interface. You can create a layer 3 interface as a loopback interface as well. Now let's see the tunnel interface. In a VPN tunnel setup, the layer 3 interface at the each end must have a logical tunnel interface for the firewall to connect and establish a VPN tunnel. A tunnel interface is a logical virtual interface that is used to deliver traffic between two endpoints. If you configure any proxy ID is counted towards any IPsec. Tunnel capacity. The tunnel interface must belongs to a security zone to apply policy, and it must be assigned to a virtual router to use existing routing infrastructure. Ensures the tunnel interface and the physical interface are assigned to the same virtual router so that the firewall can perform a route lookup and determine the appropriate tunnel to use. The layer 3 interface that the tunnel interface is attached to the typical belongs to an external zone. For example, the untraceable zone. Although the tunnel interface can be in the same security zone as the physical interface for added security and better visibility, you can create a separate zone for the tunnel interface. If you create a separate zone for the tunnel interface such as VLAN zone, you will need to create security policy to enable traffic to flow between the VPN zones and the trust zone. And tunnel interface does not require an IP address to route traffic between the sites. An IP address is required only if you want to enable tunnel monitoring or if you are using a dynamic routing protocol to route the traffic across the tunnel. With dynamic routing, the tunnel IP address serves as the next hop IP address for routing traffic to the VPN tunnel. If you are configuring the Palo Alto network firewall with a VPN peer that performs policy-based VPN, you must configure a local and remote proxy ID. When setting up the IPsec tunnel, each peer compares the proxy ID configured on it with what actually is received in a packet to allow successful IKey phase 2 negotiation. If multiple tunnels are required, configure unique proxy ID for each tunnel interface. A tunnel interface can have maximum of 250 proxy ID. Each proxy ID count towards the IPsec VPN tunnel capacity of the firewall, and the tunnel capacity varies by the firewall model. So guys, in this video we have learned what are the different interfaces available and what they do, what are their purpose. So guys, if you like this video, please subscribe my channel and press bell icon so that whatever the latestly uploaded video will come to you as soon as I upload them. Thanks for watching this video and have a wonderful day ahead. Bye.